Hello everyone and welcome back to my dining room. Now that we have all the furniture in the room, I think my next step is going to be the art on the walls. And to do that, I gathered up some stuff that I had around the house already that just really wasn't fitting where it was, or stuff that I love that I wasn't able to put up anywhere else. The inspiration for the artwork on these walls is actually this floating frame that says Home Sweet Farmhouse. And I loved the floating frame, and the black accents around it just kind of fit the modern farmhouse feel that we were going for. So we decided that any of the art that we put on the walls is actually going to be in similar frames. And I was lucky enough at Joann's to find some really big floating frames that I'm going to use on the walls. The only issue is that they're silver, so we'll take care of that. And they are all going portrait. And I actually found something that I want that needs to be landscape. So I'm going to see if I can figure out how to make one of these landscape instead of portrait. Because those are really big. This one is a medium size. I wanted something that was small also, something small to put on the wall that was also a floating frame. I lucked out, you guys, because at the Dollar Tree, they have these small little 4x6 floating frames. Now granted, they're $1, so they're not the best thing in the world. But I think that they'll be perfect for some of the small little photos or trinkets that I really want to put on the wall as well. These antique rug beaters that I actually have about a dozen of them, but I've chosen 2 that I really liked that had handles that kind of fit the colors or the feel of the room a little bit. And this other thing is this funky macrame that I got from a lady on garage sale when I bought a bunch of plants. And it's just not the cutest. I think I could continue with some of these knots to make it more consistent across, add some wooden beads or something. And it's got a weird stick here that I might take care of. Let's get to actual artwork. We happened to have this small stack of books already up on the shelf behind me, and I pulled it down one day to dust it off, and I noticed that it had a bunch of really nice artwork in it, and the pages were falling out because it's such an old book. It's from the 1800s. Some of the pages that were falling out had really nice artwork on them. So I was able to go through them and pull some things out that I really liked. I loved this simple line drawing here. I thought that really fit really nicely in this space. And this portrait that was in there. And then there's a couple of landscapes. One that's actually in landscape format and one that's in portrait. So I want to do some sort of collage with the artwork from this book. And I think that's going to tell a really nice story when I put those books back up on the shelf. There was just this small little bookmark trinket in the book. So it actually says, "This will keep your place when you read. Keep your place when you eat at home." I thought that this was just so cute, and it's a little tin bookmark, and how perfect of a saying to put in the dining room. It's just a very cute little trinket that I'm actually going to use in the room as well. In addition to the artwork that I got from this book, I went to a thrift store with one of my really great friends. She and I were able to pick up this adorable bird print, and it's actually, the birds are green, so it's going to fit perfectly in this space. But I just thought, bring some life to it with a print of an animal versus just all landscapes and plants. I thought it would be really cute in this space. Of course, the frame and the mat are a little bit outdated, so we'll find a way to put this in some of our floating frames and kind of make it all work. The last thing that I found is really, really special to me because my mother actually drew this. It's a pen and ink drawing of a cart that I've had in my garage forever, not knowing what to do with it. The paper's a little bit antiqued, so it looks really cute up against all this other stuff. And this is why I want to make one of these floating frames into a landscape shape, because of course this frame's a little bit beat up, but I really want to honor my mom with this print. I think it would be really special to her, and of course this means a lot to me to go ahead and put it in my house. These are all the different things that I want to try and incorporate onto the walls. Of course, there's a few DIY crafty bits that we need to do in order to get this stuff ready to hang up on the wall. So let's get into that first, and then we'll figure out the layout.
First thing that I did was go ahead and prep these glass frames for paint, because we did want to make them solid black with a matte black spray paint. I had these extra wax square pieces left over to protect the glass, Then I just taped everything down with a good masking tape. Spray paint does come off of glass really easy, but I didn't want to have to deal with scraping anything off. One of the other things that you really want to make sure that you do is tape off any joints in whatever paper you're using to cover the glass, because you don't want the spray paint to get up underneath of that paper. For this spray paint, we're using Krylon Color Master Paint and Primer Combo in matte black. I believe that I got this. For my mom's artwork, it was actually too large to fit in one of the large floating frames, so I'm trimming it down to be about the same size as the art that came out of the frame itself. To do that, I'm using a metal ruler and just marking off all the parts to make sure that I get some nice straight lines. So I use this metal ruler. You can use any really strong straight edge to do this, but I used a metal ruler. And you want to make sure you line it up even on your marks and tear at a diagonal angle towards the ruler in small sections all the way down, making sure to apply even pressure on the ruler the entire length of your tear. Otherwise, you do run the risk of tearing the entire piece of art. I did this for all 4 sides, and it turned out really, really beautifully with the crinkled edges all the way around. Next, to do the rest of the art, I took those art pages from the book and just started kind of playing with them to figure out how I wanted them to go in there. Knowing that I had art already set aside for the other large frames, I really wanted to make sure that I chose the ones that spoke most to me. For the bird art, I wanted to add organic looking items in there. And to do that, we used this $1 pick from the Dollar Tree and popped a leaf off of it. Artificial plants are actually really easy to take apart if you do it carefully. And so all I did was remove the spine from the back of this piece of fern and laid it nice and flat and layered it with the photograph and some of the dried leaves. This brought a little bit of pop of color, but also left it with that organic feel that we were going for with the dried pressed leaves. Next step was to put everything in the frames, and the way that I put these on, it really easily peels right off the glass. It's really beautiful. So I just peeled the paper off of every single page, and I'm wiping the glass down with some 91% alcohol. The reason I use alcohol and not glass cleaner is because it does clean it really, really well, and you know that alcohol dries faster, so you're not going to damage the art by getting it wet. If you do get some spray paint on the glass, just go ahead and give it a nice scratch off. This came off really easily by just using my fingernail, but if it was more stubborn, you could use a razor blade. And once the art is in the frame, I'm just going to give it one more wipe down with some alcohol on the outside just to get any little spray paint flecks or any fingerprints off of the outside of the frame. For the small frame, I took one of the Dollar Tree frames and pulled the stand part off the back of it, which left me with these little loops that I could use to hang it with. Because I'm hanging it this direction, I decided to grab some clear fishing line and tie it through the loops on the back of the frame on both sides. For the macrame, I'm going to use these beads from the Dollar Tree. They're hair beads, but they have a really nice opening in them to be able to put this thicker yarn. The twigs on the back of this actually snapped off really easily, so now this macrame will lay nice and flat against the wall. I started by removing some of the random knots that had been tied at the bottom of this that were kind of making it seem unbalanced and wonky and actually made the threads look jagged and bulky, and I didn't like it. So I removed a lot of those knots and assessed kind of what the design looked like and how she managed to get the knots in there. I don't do macrame, so I did have to look it up, and this is called the alternating square knot. The way that she did it was really interesting, and so I decided to go ahead and keep with that same knot all the way down instead of adding in some sort of other design. And I just kept doing this square knot until I achieved kind of a triangle pattern for this macrame piece. This did shorten some of the threads, which in turn made me have to cut it down a little more than I had anticipated, but all in all, I am happy with the way that it turned out. In order to get the beads on, I did have to wet the ends of the string just to gather them back together because this yarn was really fat and loose. So I just pulled the beads up kind of every 2 strands and tied them off with just a regular knot that like you'd use to tie any random string. Nothing fancy there. Then, like I said, some of the strings ended up being really short, so I went in and gave it a trim, and in order to trim it to where the short strings were blended in, I had to do a rather short triangle trim here. So it really kind of looks like a chevron design on the wall, which I actually do like because of all the square frames. So I'm really happy with the way that it ended up turning out. And who knows, maybe I will end up with more macrame in the rest of my house. Now that all the artwork has been put in the frames, I went ahead and laid it all out on the table just to see what I was working with. I noticed that I had 2 items that were mostly black and white, 2 that had a lot of color to them, and of course the 2 rug beaters, and the other 2 items, the macrame and the small frame, that just added a little bit of extra dimension and texture with the rest of the art. Once I knew what I wanted on either wall, kind of roughly arranged them in a way that I thought would look really nice once it was actually installed on the wall. And this is the design that I went with. Before I put the art on the wall, I went ahead and hung the curtains. We're using these Lenda curtains, which were $25 for the pair. And it's actually not too bad of a price for these curtains, and they're beautiful, and they kind of have a stitch running through them. They look almost like a linen fabric, but in this beautiful deep gray color. So most of the IKEA curtains do come with these tie back. I don't want to ever lose them, so I use a safety pin and pin it to the back of one of the tabs that are going to be near the wall so that you actually can't see that it's hanging there. This just helps keep everything together. So I started by hanging the larger pieces of art, and to do that I'm using these monkey hooks. They're my favorite hook. You put them in very similar to a tack. You don't need a hammer or a nail. For the landscape frame, I did decide to go ahead and use these modified picture hanging hooks that I just bent to the shape of a mirror hook that you'd use to hang a frameless mirror. Then I slid the frame down into the hooks, and this seems to be holding it really well. I do like the way that it looks slightly different than the others because there's no chain hanging from it, and it's kind of a free floating frame. This wall has got to be one of my favorite, just with the addition of the different colors and the fact that my mom's art is on this wall, and that small frame is just so quaint and so cute on this wall. This has been episode 2 of several episodes that we will see in this Redesigning Home series, and I'm very excited to be able to share these with you. Please remember to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and click the bell icon to make sure that you're notified every time I post. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.